Welcome to Let's Talk HR. And today we're actually going to talk about whether or not HR should exist. And why do we need it? After all, people are grown-ups, they can look after themselves, they don't need anyone like us. Now, why have we even got this conversation of Let's Talk HR? It's an irrelevance. Now, to help explain why it's not an irrelevance, I hope, I am joined today by Dan and Claire. Claire may be in and out, so we may be seeing edits of her because I've got a sick child today, Claire, but that's nothing you can do about that. That's the way world works, isn't it? So, absolutely. But also, how's the business going? You're coming up to a year and a half?
It is. It'll be a year on the 14th of November, which is crazy. But yeah, absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. So obviously I'm very keen to talk about why we need HR, because otherwise I set my business for no reason whatsoever. So but no, it's really, really good, James. Thank you. Really good.
And Dan, first time joining us. Thank you very much for joining us today. And yeah, how are you doing here in your brick office, as I called it at the start?
Yeah, it's very much a breeze block office, so I'm trying to decorate it as prettily as I can to make sure that, this is a welcoming HR space for everybody. But yeah, no, doing good. Thanks for having me.
Well, as of 2019, CIPD had 150,000 members worldwide. And what we're starting to see is growth in things like the Middle East and places where people say, oh, they don't treat people like people and stuff like that. So we're starting to see HR as its role become a lot more than just recruitment, a lot more than just employee engagement, a lot more than just hire and fire. You're the people that get wheeled out when the axe has got to come down. If someone comes up to you in the pub, Dan, and says, right, what you work in HR, what's that? You just fire people, don't you? And you go, no, what I do is.
So it depends on who I'm obviously speaking to, but a lot of people, I have to have the conversation and go, oh yeah, I work in HR. And they go, what? What's that? No. Personnel? And then, so people are still kind of making that link of personnel. And then there could be somebody else, say it's a younger employee, and go, I work with people. And then that's exactly what I do. Anything around people and or personnel. And it's not just hire and fire, showing you the door or showing you the entry. So, yeah.
I was going through the list of some of the stuff, recruitment and selection, assessment data, everything that goes to that. Yeah, that's what everyone straight away goes to. Oh, you're just an in-house recruitment consultant. Well, no. There's the training and development of staff internally and building development plans and making sure that you're not having to necessarily use recruitment. Then you've got performance management and ensuring everything's sort of good within the business, managing the culture, quality and diversity, well-being of staff, compensation and benefits, which we'll come to later. Then there's legal regulations and law regulations, which I know you're really on top of. And then some of the newer stuff like organizational design, organizational development, organizational planning. I mean, how do you put it all on one webpage to explain what you do, Claire?
Different tabs. Different tabs, different services. But no, you're right. There is a very, very an old-fashioned view of what HR is. It's that hiring and firing. It's kind of the police coming out wagging your finger, very reactive. And no, it's certainly not in sort of the current world. It's much more proactive. It's much more well-being focused. And yeah, of course, there's the disciplinaries and there's the grievances and there's the data and the stats, and you do have to be mindful of that. But it's as Dan says, it's the people. It's everything to do with people from start to finish. But then the whole life cycle of that individual in every which way. Absolutely.
So, I was thinking about this before. If we were to rename HR now, because obviously it's human resources is what it stands for. Hopefully everybody knows that, but if not, at least CIPD have started using the term people professionals. Yeah. Which I prefer. Is there anything else that you like to refer to yourselves as, or is people professionals more comfortable nowadays?
Yeah, I use the word people. So my last role before I set up my business was head of people, and that really stayed with me. Yeah, I mean, obviously I say HR because that's what everybody knows it as, and I am an HR consultant, but yeah, people is definitely the word that resonates with me.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it, Dan? Because you kind of want to rebrand it, but if anyone goes on Google to search anything to do with they need to the word HR. So I think it's one of those things that we're not going to be able to change. But I mean, CIPD found 61% said that their role was now becoming a lot more strategic post-COVID, especially with the hybrid working, how it's all coming together. So it's not just your bog standard, I'm a people professional, I'm a human resources, I'm going to manage the resources. There's so much more to it. And are you finding yourself, it's more sort of trying to work out how the logistics of things is and a lot more strategy of how you implement stuff now, because you can't just go, let's get everyone together and say, right, this is what we're doing, and then send everyone away and bosh, done, back to your breeze block office and job done.
Yeah, so I guess it's very much the case of it's always going to be reactive. Well, I feel at the minute, the way that my company operates in terms of how we approach things, it's always going to be reactive because of, one, the size of the business, but then also the being standalone within HR as well. So there's nobody else to bounce those ideas off and go down that kind of strategic path. So it's very much like when things come here and now. So the strategy kind of gets put on that back burner sometimes. And that's kind of where I would say the issues may lie, because you're just constantly focusing on reactive side of HR, or okay, there's somebody's punched somebody in the face, so let's go through the disciplinary route, or they may have put a grievance in because nobody's flushed the toilet. Those type of things do happen, and that they take precedence over the day. So I think it's very difficult for HR to be reactive, but then also having that seat on the table in that leadership conversation of let's talk about strategy, unless there is, that structure there within the business that you're working in. And which is great segue probably for you, Claire, because that's why people bring consultants in as well.
Well, I mean, I would, the day-to-day stuff always takes over, doesn't it, Dan? Yeah, I mean, it's and because if you do have somebody who has punched somebody in the face, that does need dealing with, of course it is. But I would say that actually those operational things, they are directly linked to the strategy, because, your strategy overall is how people can add value to the organization, help meet those business objectives whilst meeting the needs of those individuals, and it's balancing that. So having good processes in place, managing disciplinaries quickly, effectively, fairly, I think there's a direct correlation with the people strategy, which will always be around getting the best out of your people for as little money as possible. Probably, that tends to be what it is. And I think you can often, certainly business owners can often think that the day-to-day running of HR is, operation and strategy are not combined at all. Actually, I think there is quite a correlation. I don't think you can have one without the other. But yeah, I think strategic HR is definitely put on the back burner.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's the same resource to time ratio that every other department's got. So there are immovable things, and this is what most businesses do wrong. There are immovable things, which is your day-to-day, HRM, human resource management, maybe human relationship mediation, depending on how you want to look at it. And you can't get away from those when it happens, but businesses also need to give people time and space away to start to think about, well, how does this develop? How do we get, I don't know, Derek, pick Derek for some reason for the last few days.
Oh, Derek.
How do we get, this is good for Derek. How do we get Derek from doing his day-to-day into that managerial position so that he's ready for it and he's not an accidental manager and he stumbles and fails because we haven't built the right support around him? How do we help Derek? See, it's good for Derek.
Good for Derek.
But that's the dog. But sometimes it's impossible. As you said, you can just come into work and as Dan said, someone's punched someone in the face, and you've got no choice but to go into full-on HR coordination mode of going, right, let's investigate, let's get all the reports, let's get all the paperwork. Because again, one thing that I do explain HR as to some people is it's a backstop. It's a backstop for not making errors that you don't need to make. And a lot of the time, the example that you gave earlier, Dan, is you're protecting the business from itself, and that's a lot of the time what HR does, because people can make emotive decisions, and it's HR's job, isn't it, to be that sort of Switzerland, as I often refer to it as, and stuff like that. So when you're called in, a lot of the time, emotions are quite high, I assume.
Yeah, and you beat me to it there, because I was about to throw Switzerland in on that there. But so let's use the fun police then as the analogy. But yeah, no, it's difficult in that respect, because people may think that, okay, HR's only there to protect the company, but it's also obviously unpopular opinion there to protect the employees as well. And it is that two-way or almost three-way partnership that you're going through there, and it's that constant kind of triangle of back and forth. So it's I guess maybe a struggle that exists is very much about this is what HR do, and this is why we do it, even though it's probably on the back burner of everybody's minds of why we do it. And if it was something that we don't really need in businesses, then I've wasted probably a decade plus of my life, and probably Claire has too. So we're going the wrong path if it wasn't needed, or it wasn't such a requirement within businesses.
Well, before we went live, I mentioned, CIPD suggests that for every £1 invested in people practices, it's a £9 increase in operating profit. That's from the research that they've done in terms of, it's about getting the best out of people. It's about having that strategic view. It's about understanding what levers to push and what levers to put the hold on. I was talking to someone yesterday, and they talked about HR trying to manage what is sometimes referred to as discretionary effort. And HR manage that discretionary effort where people are prepared to do a little bit extra for a little bit more money. But it's like a battery. If you're constantly pushing that discretionary effort, there's nothing left in the battery. And HR's job is to go, well, actually, you need to give people time to recharge, rebuild, restructure. And, a really good example of that's the NHS at the moment, where there's so many people that are just, there's nothing left in the battery, is there, Claire? How do you approach situations like that, where you trying to tell a client or a boss or something like that, you're asking too much of people, you're pushing them too far?
Well, for me, I think it's a case of building that relationship with them first, so they sort of respect what I'm saying, and how I often communicate is that I give it to them in figures, in data. I say, look, look at your sickness rates, look at your, look at the productivity. If we've had a look and we've agreed that we've got the right head count here, and there isn't, it's not a case of and everybody's skilled, look at that, and we've got the right number of people, they've got the right competencies, but that you're not getting the output, then what else could it be? Is it how they're being managed? Is it how the workload they've got? Is it, the pressure that they're under? And I think there's a lot more now support behind this sort of movement of well-being since COVID, and about how you need to look after yourself. Rightly so. Mental health is obviously a much less taboo thing to talk about. So there's certainly I'm finding the employers and the clients who are not open to having those conversations around people needing to rest and recharge that battery. They're in the minority now, which is really pleasing to see. But there is still an end to it. It's not it's a finite level of understanding, because ultimately they're paying a salary and they want an output for it. So it is a balancing act. And I think it's just about showing, as the HR person, as Dan said, you are there to support the people and to get the best out of the people, but for the business's overall objective. And that's sometimes quite a difficult line to find. And it can sometimes look a little bit two-faced to employees as well. You know, who are you there for? Are you there for us? Or are you there for the corporate? You know, the men in those offices. So I think that's a challenge I find, that you getting that balance right, and how you portray yourself, and therefore earning the trust of everybody that you're working with. So yeah,
Claire makes a really good point, Dan, and it become, you know, with regards to an employer might see you speaking to a manager, or a manager coming into your office and then coming out smiling after having a chat with you, Dan, and suddenly the cogs start going, well, Dan's in favour of those. He's trying, you know, he's the hit squad for them, and then it's about you. And a lot of the time, you know, one of the things we've got here is misconceptions. Is people will see the challenge you give to the employees because you're making it publicly for everyone, but very rarely do people see the challenge up to the directors and managers that HR give. That a lot of the time that's hidden behind sort of meetings and structures and reports and data and analytics that you send up, because you don't want to make it public, can't make it public to everyone. How do you sort of manage that conversation of going, I am working for both sides, this isn't a one side or anything like that. I appreciate the asymmetry of what you see, but understand this is what I'm here for.
Yeah, very much. It's about the evolution of HR responsibilities to line managers. At the end of the day, it's the line manager that is doing the majority of those kind of face-to-face HR tasks. So it's one of the things that is very key for HR professionals or people professionals is to very much make sure that the managers are equipped to do those sorts of conversations, to kind of just be like, no, I was just ensuring I was having a conversation with HR to be, okay, let me just check this policy. Let me just run a scenario past you, just so that they can kind of understand how each and everything ticks in terms of like, that's how I will deal with that certain situation. So I guess there's the ownership that is also on the manager to not lose their credibility in order to say, no, I was just referring to HR as well, to say, this is what I need to do. Or I was referring to the consultant for like Claire, for example, just to ensure that I am aligned, I am correct in our policy and procedure, but also for our company's objective. But then as the HR person, as an in-house person for this example, will be very much the case of if the employee comes up to you to ask that certain question, then it's very much be open and transparent to say, I was discussing something that I'm not able to disclose with you as the employee. It wasn't about you, and I can disclose that. It just very much having that credibility, but also that trust. Once that trust's been built, there's less of a chance that employees will be having those doubts, those conversations with managers, but is that person talking about me? So yeah, that's really where I believe it kind of lies with.
There's a 2020 CIPD survey, and they found 23% of employees strongly agree. So obviously some agree, but strongly agree that HR departments listen and address their concerns. And I think it comes back to that level of transparency and what transparency you can give, doesn't it? Because Claire, you might say to the board of directors, I believe that we should have, I'm going to give this is a really bad example, I'm doing it on purpose. I believe we should do a Pizza Friday because everyone's asked for a Pizza Friday. Now, when the bosses turn around and say no to Pizza Friday, and don't do Pizza Friday, you can do way better than that. But when they turn around and say no to Pizza Friday, you're not going to go back to everyone and start going, well, I asked and they said no, so don't blame HR. You're going to protect them by, you're going to protect the bosses and protect the company by not putting a negative situation out there for everyone to know about, aren't you?
Of course. And it's about, use that example because my brain's not working enough to think of that one. But it's a case of really, it's communication. The biggest thing I do day to day with every client I work with is effective communication, and it's you're the voice of the staff, and you take those thoughts constructively to the management team. You talk it through, sharing your own points of view. You see it from all different sides, And if the answer is no to Pizza Friday, then you communicate it effectively to the team, constructively, positively, to not cause any further, unrest and people being miffed. So you're absolutely right. You are the middleman and you are the mediator. You are, you're often impartial, and it's a case of doing everything with the most effective communication that you can, and saying no to Pizza Friday,
which is fine.
Yeah, which is fine.
I mean, but it flips the other way as well, Dan, doesn't it? When it's bad news time, and it affects people, and there's legal situational occurrence that come where you've got to present things openly, fairly, equally to everyone. Again, HR standing at the front and saying, this is what's going to happen, this is how it affects you, this is what's going to happen over the short, medium, long term, this is what you can ask me, this is what I can tell you right now. And straight away you're having to be, it's HR that stand up and do it because, well, in some situations, in a lot of situations, because again, they're protecting the organization and stuff like that, and because they don't want people to feel like emotions are involved. So it's kind of a lose-lose battle in some situations, isn't it?
Yeah. So with that, I would always say that people are so sporadic and people are so unpredictable that you never really know what to kind of expect. So you have to be prepared for every situation that may happen. And you're right in what you're saying there in terms of HR delivering that, because that you HR may have been the one to write that script to give to the managers, but instead of the manager delivering that, HR will deliver that. Recent example, redundancy announcements. You're always going to upset somebody any point, even if it's good news or bad news. Someone is going to have some grievance, some sort of issue with what's being said, if it's written communication or if it's a verbal communication, because they said, oh, you were standing, like you weren't really present in the conversation, or you've used the incorrect grammar in this. Like, so many different things could come back from any type of communication that you have with the employees. So even if it is the bad, or like that example that I've just given, it's very much the case where that it's going to upset people, but you still have to deliver that information regardless, because either way it is a lose-lose. And I think briefly mentioned before about making sure that teams have their own, they've got the correct headcount, or they've got the correct capacity in order to do the work. But it's very much the case as well for the self-reflection on HR, because it's very much, if HR are kind of overworked, burnt out, it's going to be difficult for us to effectively communicate the good news or the bad news.
No, we're not saying this to put everyone off working in
of course.
HR. We're many good things about it. It's just, and this is what's really interesting. I find about HR as a role, because what you are is you're in the middle of it all.
Yeah.
And it's all right if you're the bad guy sometimes. It's all right if you're the good guy sometimes. It's all right if you're in the middle. I think about one situation where two people massively fell out because the microwave didn't get cleaned. It's classic. Always happens, every business. And obviously people go back to their normal communication groups. If they work in sales, they go back to sales. If customer service is good. They've drawn sides. So they'd all decided, well, that person cooked fish, yeah, but that person didn't clean it. And then HR comes in, mediates the situation, Switzerland's it, is completely impartial, but there is not a chance salespeople, if you side on the side of customer services, are going to think that you're anything but in favor of customers. And there's nothing customer services are going to do if you side with sales that think that you're not in that. No one's ever going to turn around and go, oh, you were so impartial there, weren't you? Such a good job, everyone's happy, because it's the nature of human beings. You always want slightly things in your favor regardless. Now, one thing that's really interesting, when I was researching this before about like misconceptions and stuff like that, people talk about how people are so essential to their businesses, so essential to what they're building and stuff like that. But 45% of HR functions in small businesses, like fewer than 250 people, don't get a seat at the table for strategic decisions
Yeah.
and you're employing 250 people and you want them all to perform at the best, but we don't want to hear how we do that better. It seems like a really odd paradox for businesses to not be sort of integrating them in, because that's 55% of businesses of 250 plus that just don't have a HR strategic person advising them on how they can make all the different elements be better. How do we sort of address that?
Who's that one to, James?
Right, sorry.
No. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's really worrying, and it would suggest to me that this perception of, you know, people being really important isn't actually true, because you know, if you haven't got you know, HR and, you know, SMT are on the board, then you're as you rightly say, you're not listening to views. And I meet clients with 90, 100 people who haven't got HR, and you just think, poor, you know, how have you got where you've got to without having somebody there to support your staff? And I think how you know, how do we change that? I think it's just a case of just continuing to, you know, wave the flag for the benefits that HR brings to an organization. And as I've mentioned before, talking to the people in the right language, talk to them about the money that they, you know, the statistics you've said about £1, and was it £9-10 back in
£9 back.
Yeah, I've read studies that Deloitte have done where it's even been higher than that. I've seen an £11 figure quoted. It's about talking to business owners in that language of, you know, this is what we can do, and this is the money that can be saved. And it's often what I do in my pitches. You know, I'm talking to the top level of who say, well, why do we need you? And that's what I answer. It's you need me because this is the money I can save you over the next 6 months by XYZ. And that's what they want to hear. It's because I remember sitting down with a client 6-7 months ago who said, well, HR don't affect the bottom line, and they don't. And I said, well, they do, you know. And it's because a lot of businesses want to see those tangible results of money, and I totally understand that. So they sometimes find it difficult to see the correlation between somebody looking after the people and profit. So if you can communicate the very clear link between that, then that's when I think they start to listen and move HR on up the level of importance.
I think that's summarized it really well. You know, I think about, let's say, for example, a sales team, and everyone's going, oh, well, the sales team are doing well, we need to improve them, so let's bring in a sales specialist. Well, at what point have we sat down and worked out how they're feeling, what they like, what they don't like, how can we engage with them better, what are we doing? And so many companies, Dan, just annual survey it. Pizza Friday annual survey. I'm going through all the greatest hits today. How do you ensure that there's one consistent feedback coming to the HR department so that we can start to build that sort of almost quantitative data, so that we can do as Claire said, well, if you spend £1 here, I reckon that you might be able to get, you know, there's evidence here to show that you'll be able to get £11 back, not just the 9. How do we sort of do that?
I think first of all is to make sure that the employees are on board in order to do these employee engagement activities, because there's no point putting out an annual survey if it's only going to come back, say 40% of the employees are going to fill that out, or employees don't want to fill that out because they feel that they may be targeted. So it's first of all about ensuring that the employee's safety in bringing anonymous feedback or just any feedback forward without it being anonymized. I think some people may not want to give feedback because of the repercussions that could be faced for them. They may not be seen for a salary increase or a promotion because of certain, you know, I said this back in 2017 on the annual review. One thing that I do with my current company is we don't just do the annual reviews now. We do a mid-year review as well. I know that's not fixing the problem. It's just slowly getting there.
Steps closer, isn't it? It's constant steps forward.
Of course. And then there's also the option to do the monthly, bi-weekly or weekly check-ins, one-to-ones with your managers in order to say, hey, this is how I feel. Our platform that we use asks the employee questions, and then that puts the employee in the management shoes, I guess, to be like, well, how would you answer this? Or why do you think this went well? How do you think this? So it's about kind of having that reverse conversation and maybe feed forward rather than feedback as well.
It sounds almost, well, it probably is to a degree. It sounds like a 360 almost, isn't it? You know, you're asking for sort of that two-way communication. And I always think with 360s, when you get them done, you need independent Switzerland to sort of give you that feedback as to this is what it says, this is what you need to, because again, it's that emotional response to a 360. It's not like a disc or a Belbin or an MBTI where it's like, oh, this is what your preferences are. It's like, well, these are the things you're really good at. These are the things people are saying you're really bad at. I know when I did one, people were saying, well, we can tell when things are going bad, but you won't tell us what they are. We can just tell by your demeanor. It's like, well, I thought I was really good at hiding it. Turns out I'm not. Or we know when we're having a really good day because you'll stop and have conversations. So again, you learn so much more from 360s, don't you, Claire, than you do just these generic management type activities. And I like companies that really invest in that sort of holistic feedback, because I think it makes things a lot clearer. It
absolutely does. I think it's just people are fearful of what people are going to say. And I think people, generally speaking, there can be emotional reactions to feedback. And then, as Dan rightly says, it's that fear of what that's going to mean. And even anonymous CVs, even anonymous surveys and feedback, certainly the smaller companies, you can tell who it is.
Yeah.
And you know, the way somebody writes, and it does, you know, so yeah, I love 360s, and I'm all for feedback, good, bad, ugly. I think you can always, if you've got the right mindset with it, of it being constructive, a way to improve relationships, improve everything within the business, they're amazing. But there is a lot of work to do on getting people brought into doing them that I can see.
Yeah.
And then people filling them out, using them in the right way, and it not just being a
axe to grind.
Yeah. yeah.
Oh, Derek's getting it now.
Poor Derek.
Well, if we'd have worked with him to get him ready, he wouldn't.
This is it. We've obviously not done our job right, have we? So,
I want to sort of start to think about some of the more future trends that we're seeing sort of HR get more and more involved in. So we're seeing a lot more organizational design. We're seeing a lot more quality, diversity, and inclusion language in terms of how we present ourselves internally within the business and externally within the business. HR are now starting to get quite heavily involved in sort of tone of voice and how we write. Yeah. What are some of the more newer things that you're finding yourself getting involved in, Dan? You're like, oh, this is new. Like tone of voice was a big one for me, having to sort of get involved in that type of stuff about how we speak.
Yeah. One thing that we have a corporate social responsibility team that we have that are self-driven by the employees, and one thing that came from that eventually, obviously, the work and liaise with HR is about issuing pronouns out around the business, which I think was very forward thinking. For some businesses, not a lot of businesses want to do that, or employees may not want to do that, and that's totally fine. You understand and respect that people want to do that or not do that. And one of the great things is our CEO does that, and it's very beating the drum. Say, even in the email signature, my pronouns are, and then have their pronouns in the section there. So I think that's probably one of the initiatives that I never thought that I'd ever consider 5, 6, 7 years ago. So yeah, pronouns and introducing that into the workplace. Even one thing that's coming back now, we're in the new normal when we're going back to hybrid mode, is very much about office etiquette. It was never a conversation that was had, but now we've got a new generation that have come into the workplace during COVID and been working from home. They're coming back now into the workplace. but it's the first time they've actually physically been in a workplace at an office. And it's very much about, okay, not putting fish in the microwave, as you mentioned, or making sure you're cleaning up after it, or Derek, you know, not having enough space in or spatial awareness because you're sharing a kind of a pod, a line of desks with somebody else. I think that is going to be probably the next wave of conversations that we're going to be having, because a lot of businesses are looking to return to the office, and I think that's what we'll probably be involved with.
Yeah, Claire, I was seeing quite a lot of people struggling, you know, like group communications, text language in live chats, people feeling they had to respond immediately to live chats, whatever time of day or night. And also I've seen a lot of GIF usage, because obviously that's got integrated into a lot of live chats where people don't necessarily understand the context behind them and stuff like that, and that's creating GIF grievances is something that I've been seeing quite a lot of recently, which is really weird. You what, sorry?
I haven't had one of those yet. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. And tone of voice is a really difficult thing, isn't it? Because how we speak now, we're all face to face and stuff like that. Now I'm openly dyslexic, so I write really blunt messages on purpose because it's the least amount of words that I possibly can. Now, someone has multiple times got offended by what I've written because, you know, it was really blunt, really direct. It wasn't nice. And we're going to see a lot of that, aren't we? That's still, I think, kicking out post-COVID and hybrid working and people messaging, because how I speak is not how I write. How, you know, everyone else is different. Some people use emojis, some people use GIFs, and I think it's a new language that's coming through, almost emojis. How do we sort of... Everyone says write a policy, but I don't think a policy can necessarily pull it off, can it?
No, and I think it goes a step further in terms of being the meetings face to face, because we've done so many meetings online and a lot of the time without cameras on, and you suddenly have to remember body language, and you suddenly have to remember how to read people and to talk to more than one people in different places in the room. You know, not all on one screen. And I think there is definitely, it is an art communicating in person, and it's an art that not everybody has naturally, and it takes time to work on. And I think we are definitely seeing that having a negative impact on communication as people are coming back into the workplace. But no, you're right, there's not a policy, because it's human beings. I think it's a case of time, adjustment, and you know what, some training. There's nothing wrong with having some training on how to have effective face-to-face meetings again, because we've had a very, very strange 3 or 4 years. I mean, gosh, it's crazy, isn't it? But it has been 3 and a bit years. Yeah, nearly 4. And certainly for younger generations, younger people who are sort of fresh into the workplace now, who have to go back into the workplace and work 3 or 4 days a week when they haven't had to do that before, they may well need some support and guidance on how to hold themselves and talk to their colleagues. And I think that's okay. There just needs to be an awareness of it, something proactively done about it, so it's not then a conduct issue. Because actually, if these people outside of school or university have never really had to have a face-to-face conversation with somebody, then how are they supposed to know how to do it in a professional setting? So I think it's just being proactive, recognizing the world we're living in, and then supporting people to talk proper.
It's a really good point. I'm thinking about like how I sit in meetings, like, so I sit pretty much in front of a camera all day and stuff like that. And I'll meet people and stuff like that, and people say stuff, and then I'll bring something up on my other screen. I'll be like, "Oh, that's really interesting. Let me look into it. Let me look up on my phone."
You can't do it.
Face-to-face meeting. How rude does that look? So you just pull your phone out when someone's talking and start typing away.
Yeah, it is. It's
automatic for me now.
Yeah, and I'm always quite flippant and say I need to make sure I haven't got my pajama bottoms in when I go in, because it's that kind of thing as well. It is, I'm quite fortunate that I do both, and I've always done both. But it is a different skill set that you have to use, and some people won't have used it for ever at all, or for a long time. And I think it's just being aware of that.
It's flexing a muscle that people may have never even used before, you know.
It's definitely out of muscle memory for me. I was in an office for 20 odd years, and right now, you're saying it, we're like, oh yeah, it's a good point. I would naturally just pick something up now and look it up if someone says something interesting.
Yeah, and I actually think I think there's a confidence thing, because anything that's said on you could have your notes everywhere. You can be totally prepared. Whereas you're quite raw and vulnerable face to face, and it's I think that confidence will play a part as well, which impacts how you behave, how you talk, how you hold yourself.
And Dan, it really starts to lean towards where HR is going to have a lot more value in these types of situations. Because if you think about AI, automations, computer generation, actually the biggest value is now coming in human-to-human relationship type things. Mm-hmm. So Claire reminding me of the situations where it's actually rude to act like that in a face-to-face situation. Well, actually, we're finding that more of the sit in office by yourself, type a load of stuff up, that's becoming more AI driven. And actually it's the people to people stuff we're seeing now that really we're going to have to get more involved in thinking about it from a future trend perspective. Do you prep? How do you prep people for face to face? I'm going through it in my head.
Like you saying that now, I'm thinking the same thing. Like, what can we do in order to prep people for that have never done it before? Yeah, we've got a learning management system that they can go on and they can do a fancy course and have a little look. And this is how you have a conversation with Derek and Johnny and Paul, but experiencing it is probably the best. I know everybody learns in different ways, but the majority of people work in that kind of kinesthetic approach and being in that moment, kind of all guns blazing. I'm having a conversation for the first time, face to face, like you mentioned. So I think it just, I've probably said this quite a lot during this 40 minutes we've been together, but it really depends on the individual, or it really depends on the situation. If there's no real need for people to have that face-to-face conversations, then it may be not even considered it or even fathomed it. But for those, or the majority of offices are open plan, so people will be having conversations from across the room, and one person will be shouting because the other person's got the headphones in. It's very much, we have to kind of live and breathe in those situations for then people to learn and react from it, because you don't know if such and such is going to be a loud talker because you've only spoken to them in front of the screen, or whereas somebody will kind of go in on themselves, very introverted because they're with people, but behind the screen they've got that kind of confidence that Claire mentioned, or that empowerment that they kind of feel safe. It's that comfort blanket for people. I think, as you've just highlighted there, it's almost 4 years now since we've been doing this type of way of working. A lot of people may have come out of university or school that they've done online, so they've not really had those kind of adult conversations. So if someone left school and went straight into the world of work, they've never really had those conversations, or citizenship classes that they have in school to be like, this is how you act in an interview, or this is how you greet somebody the first time that you meet them. So it's do we look forward or look backwards in terms of how we approach that? I know that was a really long-winded approach to answer that question for you, but is it, which way do we look? Do we look both ways? Do we look in the now? Do we look in the past? Do we look in the future? Where do we go?
And as you're going through it, I'm starting in my head to go, well, if you think about the last 4 years, COVID, we've all been working hybrid. Then we're talking about things like potentially 4-day weeks and having reduced hours. That was one of the things that we've explored. Then we've been going into, if you think about the last 4 years, the rate of ADHD diagnosis and autism diagnosis and neurodiverse diagnosis, where we need to become more accommodating to people that don't necessarily act in how you would anticipate a 1990s boardroom to act, where everyone's like, oh yes, brilliant point, sir. Oh, what? It's all changing, isn't it? It's like the way of face to face is going to be completely different, but there's still going to be so much more human to human contact that we need to sort of help people navigate, Claire. It's just I know like we're rebuilding it from scratch at times.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I know there's definitely a place for AI, and that's the world that we're living in, and the future. You know, it's all really, really exciting, all incredibly impressive. But I don't think there is ever a substitute for human communication, because we're emotional, and that's the difference. You know, where emotions are involved, you need people to talk to one another, and I will wave that flag till the day I die. You know,
I was having a really interesting conversation. My wife, who works for a hospital, and we were saying what's going to be needed more is nurses, potentially more than doctors, because doctors, general practitioners, are diagnosticians, so they listen to your symptoms and they give you a diagnosis. But when you're in hospital, it's the nurse, it's the pastoral, it's the people, it's that reassurance. So are we going to be in more need of nurses than we are doctors? Because once you've built the logic model and it starts to build in its variances for responses of people extreme on pain, low on pain, and stuff like that, are they going to be needed the same way? And it's really interesting when you start to sort of go down things.
Yeah, and my entire family are medics, and obviously, you're poorly in hospital. Of course, you want a exceptional doctor to make you better, and I've got all the respect in the world for the medical profession, but you do also need that pastoral care, because somebody's emotional strength and psychological strength when they're dealing with anything physical is also incredibly important, and that is affected by the way you're talked to and the way you're treated. Yeah.
Now we're going to finish off with an unpopular opinion on HR, and I said that I've got this one to you both before we've even started, and we've gone through all the different elements of what HR is, whether it's recruitment, training, performance management, compensation, benefits, labour regulations, legal, organisational development. Soon it will be, how Derek should sit in a meeting, which may be human behaviour. Let's call it human behaviour. I think that's probably, especially when we get robots built as well, and they're sitting in meetings for us. But compensation and benefits, I think, is a really interesting one, because for me, I don't think payroll sits in HR. And that's just, I think it should sit in finance. But I do think that compensation and benefits, the benefits part stays in HR in terms of understanding the benefits and what motivates people, how you can get the most out of people. I don't like a blanket benefits. I think people should be able to build their own benefits that fit their need and their situation. Where do you sit on the payroll side of things, Dan? And this is your opinion, not the opinion of your employers, we will say.
Yes. Okay. I'm glad you said that. I think that there should be definitely a relationship there between finance and HR, as there should be with HR and every other department, but especially for the question that you're asking. Whereas I think payroll should be ran and processed through finance. So I agree with what you're saying there, but I still think that HR should have that intervention with that conversation of when there's like the salary increases, and obviously we'll be involved in that sort of process, but it should be very much here is the payroll run for this month. Do you want to glance your eyes over it before we process it? And that's payroll talking to me. So there's that balance between the two of very much, it's a separate pair of eyes to check it, but I don't think it should be a HR responsibility.
Clary, are we agreed? Is this now a popular opinion?
It is 100%. Yeah, I think I think payroll should be with finance, but I do agree with you that the benefits side and the wider compensation should sit with HR, because that's a strategic piece, and that's a looking at money saved for the business, and it's looking at what employees want, what they need, and again, flexi benefits, definitely the way forwards. Completely agree with you, James. Very popular opinion, all in agreement.
Well, there we go. I mean, yeah, because I remember speaking to someone, unfortunately she got a hysterectomy when she was 21, and she was like, if ever an employer had HRT as an employee benefit, I would never leave that company. Yeah. And that is a very unique benefit to a very unique situation, but they have to pay on top of their own salary from what the NHS gives them additional HRT, because what you get on the NHS isn't enough. Yeah. So it's about 400 quid a month. Now, if that was an employee benefit and she could sacrifice, shall we say, I'm trying to think of standardized employee benefits, like extra duvet days and stuff like that, sacrifice a few days holiday for that regular support from the employer. You should do it straight away.
Yeah.
Right, I'd never leave. It's exactly what I need to live. And if an employer hears me, understands me, feels me, that's how we work.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'm a big fan of the flexible benefits for your own unique situation and just having sort of a catalogue.
Yeah, me too.
Worked out yesterday when we were doing reasonable adjustments, because obviously that's what potentially some of these benefits are. They're reasonable adjustments for people that are slightly above reasonable. On average, it costs less than £500 for 80% of all reasonable adjustments. So really, when you talk about flexible benefits and creating something that's bespoke to people that they need to function best in their job, it's really not that expensive in the grand scheme of things. Last question for you both, and I'll start with you, Dan. Do you still feel we need HR, and are you still happy that you chose the path?
Definitely, yes. Yeah, of course. I don't know how to expand on that then more than yes.
And Claire, for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Live and breathe it. We couldn't do anything else. No regrets.
Well, there you have it. That's everything to do with HR. We've gone through future trends, unpopular opinions, addressing common misconceptions, strategic role of HR and how it fits into everything. Thank you very much to Dan and Claire for joining us and giving us your insights into this particular thing. If you are considering a career in HR, if you're studying the qualification and stuff like that, there are a whole raft of bits and pieces of information and studying stuff you can think. And spare a thought for Derek. We've helped him in the end. We've managed to get him up there. So I'll catch you on the next one and take care.